Good evening, everyone. This is the DMV NFL show. I am Richard Brown coming to you from Maryland. Tonight, we're going to talk about the hottest topics this week in the NFL. First up is the quarterback situation in Denver. Right now, Brock Osweiler is slated to start this weekend against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but ever since the loss to the Oakland Raiders, everyone's saying, should they go back to Peyton? Should they stick with Brock? There's a lot of different pros and cons. With the pros of Osweiler, you got the bigger arm, which the defenses have to cover the deep routes right now and not sit on the inside stuff like you have to do with Peyton Manning. And then, of course, Brock has the mobility, which opens up the run game, which, keeps one guy in the box. They can hit tight ends over the middle. He's a better fit for this Gary Kubiak offense. When he was hired as the coach of the Denver Broncos, I just wasn't sure how he was going to cater his offense to Peyton. I know Peyton had some growing pains when he was, going under center, and then they did it out of the shotgun and the pistol to try to cater to what he did, the last couple of years under Adam Gase. And I think with Osweiler, with the physical tools, I think Gary Kubiak can do what he wants to do and successfully run the offense he wants to run. And then you have, he's a young quarterback. He's getting games under his belt, and that's really good going forward to see if he is the quarterback of the future. And there hasn't been a lot of turnovers. With Peyton, you had all these interceptions, fumbles, because he hasn't been protecting the ball well. And, Osweiler's had, an interception here and there, and he had that strip sack fumble against the Raiders last week. But I think overall he's done a good job taking care of the football. And, and the cons are, there are the quarterback's mistakes. He takes sacks when he doesn't have to. He tends to, when his first read is taken away, he tends to panic and, walk into a sack or throw the ball away or just take off and run. That's one con. And then he holds the ball too long. Like I said, he takes unnecessary sacks. He doesn't have the experience like a Peyton Manning does. Peyton Manning has been in this league for about 18 years. He's lost playoff games, but he has a lot of experience. And then consistency. Brock, when he played against the Chicago Bears in his first start, he was pretty good. Then against the Patriots, started off a little cold, then heated up towards the end of the game. And then, against the Chargers, he was consistent, but then had the red zone interception that was picked off by Jason Verrett. And then against the Raiders, started off great, but he missed a wide open Virgil Green, the end zone that, could have put him up big against the Raiders the second half. Granted, it was the offensive line. They weren't able to protect him, but still, that consistency. And, with Peyton Manning, the only pro I can see with him is his experience. He's been, like I said, he's been in this league for 18 years. He's won some playoff games, but then again, he's lost some playoff games, and that's one of the cons. His playoff record is not that great, and he's lost the last two Super Bowls he's been in. And, and then the turnovers, he has 17 interceptions right now, which I think leads the league. And then, the lack of mobility, the offensive line is not good right now. They gave up 6 sacks against the Oakland Raiders last week, and I just think that with Manning, his lack of mobility, it's not going to work. And then, the injuries are starting to catch up with him. He had the plantar fascia tear in his foot. He's been dealing with rib injuries. He's been dealing with ankle injuries. And I just think that over time, his body is starting to fail him, and I don't think it's going to work. And then the Gary Kubiak offense, it doesn't suit his strengths because he's not mobile. He doesn't have the big arm. And, and because he doesn't have the big arm, the defenses can sit on the underneath routes and not, guard deep, because he doesn't have the arm strength to get the ball downfield, anymore. And I just think that right now, I think, honestly, their best option is to stick with Brock Osweiler because he has a strong arm. He has the mobility. Gary Kubiak can run the offense he wants to run. And just they'll be able to open things up more offensively. And they seem to be more efficient now. Granted, there are some bumps in the road like against the Oakland Raiders last week, but the offensive line didn't protect. Within 2 seconds, Brock Osweiler had guys on him. If Peyton Manning was back there, I think the Raiders would have had 12 sacks. I just think now they need to stick with the hot hand. I think he gives them the best chance to win. I don't see him winning the Super Bowl. I think best case scenario, they'll get to the conference title game and, lose to the Patriots or Pittsburgh or Cincinnati. I just don't see Denver going that far. All right, next up, we're going to talk about coaches in danger of getting fired. There's a lot of reports out there about coaches on the hot seat. And the first one I want to talk about that's pretty obvious to everyone is Chuck Pagano. If the Colts make the postseason, maybe they'll keep him. But it's obvious to me, early in the year, after they lost to the Jets, he took some shots at Andrew Luck and the general manager Ryan Grigson, and we all know that Ryan Grigson is Jim Irsay's boy. So if anyone's going to go first, it's going to be Pagano, and the team just doesn't seem to be playing that hard for him. I mean, they gave up 51 points against the Jaguars last week. They just seemed like a very inconsistent team. And when they face these high-powered offenses, they get scorched. And I just think right now, Pagano, he turned down a contract extension to stay there. I just don't think he and Jim Irsay and Ryan Grigson see eye to eye. I think he'll be gone at the end of the season if they don't make the playoffs, but I think he'll get a new head coaching job within the next 24 hours, because I think he's a great coach. I just think in a better situation, I think he would do better. And then there's Mike Pettin in Cleveland. I think it would be in the Browns' best interest to keep him. I mean, they change coaches a lot. They're not a very good team right now. They have a lot of injuries at some key positions, but the Browns last year started off 7-3, and then they lost 6 straight games, finished 7-9, and this year they sort of picked up where they left off. They just haven't been consistent all year. They're not getting consistent quarterback play. I mean, Josh McCown, I think, actually played pretty well, but the offensive line hasn't been protecting. They haven't gotten anything out of the run game. There's no dominant wide receiver. I mean, I like Travis Benjamin. I think he's really, really good, but he's not that big receiver like when they had Josh Gordon that would really have defensive coordinators staying up late to plan for him. I mean, Gary Barnidge has played very well, but I just think at the end of the day, they lost games they should have won. They're not consistent. I don't see any progress, and I think that, in the end, I think Mike Pettin's going to be gone. And I also think that the general manager, Ray Farmer, will be gone as well. Jeff Fisher, I think that's another one who will probably get fired, because St. Louis has got a tremendous amount of talent on the defensive side of the ball. Their offensive line is improving. They have some offensive weapons. They drafted Todd Gurley. They just didn't get the quarterback play this year. When they traded for Nick Foles, I thought he would, do as good as he did in Philly, but there was just no consistency. And then they insert Case Keenum, who is not the answer. There just hasn't been consistency. And with all that talent, and to lose all those games, I just think it falls on coaching. I think he's gone too. And then Tom Coughlin, this is another one. If the Giants miss the playoffs, I think he's out. He's got one more year left on his contract. He'd be going into a lame duck year, and I just think that most likely the Giants will part ways with him. And then there's Dan Campbell in Miami. I like Dan Campbell. I think he's a passionate leader, but it just seems he has that look on the sideline when things seem to go a little south. He has no answers, and I just think that the Dolphins had a lot of talent going into the season. They were a consensus pick to get into the playoffs as a wild card, and they just haven't been consistently playing. I think that they overspent on free agency on Ndamukong Suh. They brought in guys that really haven't done much. Ryan Tannehill is not progressing the way they want to. I think Stephen Ross is going to find a new coach, someone with experience, and I just think Dan Campbell's going to be out of a job, but I think he'll probably get a coordinator position. Then there's Mike Mularkey in Tennessee. I mean, they changed coaches. Firing Ken Whisenhunt after the 1-6 start. They haven't been much better. I mean, and I think in part is the Titans are just not a very good team right now. I mean, they got Marcus Mariota in the draft. The offensive line is starting to gel a little bit, but they don't have that dominant wide receiver. I like Dorial Green-Beckham. I think he'll develop into a good receiver, but Kendall Wright has disappeared. I don't know what happened with Kendall Wright. And Jason Hunter, never really materialized to be anything. They cut Hakeem Nicks. I like Delaney Walker. I think the running game just hasn't been where it needs to be. And I just think at the end of the day, Mike Mularkey's been a head coach in this league, but he doesn't have that wow factor. And I think that, there's rumors about Chip Kelly being traded from Philly to Tennessee. I don't see that happening. I think the Tennessee Titans are going to reach to, maybe a college coach or a coordinator, and they're going to fill that position. I think Mularkey's out of a job. And then there's Jason Garrett, and everyone seems to think that Garrett will probably never get fired because he and Jerry Jones are very close. But I just don't think as a commander, as a leader of men, I just don't think he's the right guy for them. And I know they were 12-4 last year, but they could have won a couple of games without Tony Romo. I think it was bad coaching on his part. And if they lose all the rest of their games, I could see Jason Garrett being out of a job. And then there's Mike McCoy in San Diego. A lot of people seem to think he probably will not be fired. I know that Dean Spanos came out and said that they were thinking about a coaching change, but nothing's really set in stone right now. And I think that the Chargers do have talent, but they have a lot of injuries, on key positions. Keenan Allen was out for the year with the lacerated kidney. The offensive line, they've been reshuffling time in and time out. And, DJ Fluker really hasn't panned out. He's the tackle they drafted a couple of years ago. Phillip Rivers is consistently getting sacked every play. Melvin Gordon hasn't done anything, and I don't know if that's on coaching, but I think that, injuries happen in this league. Look at the New England Patriots. They have a decimated offensive line, and the receivers are getting hurt left and right. But because of good coaching, they're able to scheme better. I like Mike McCoy as a coordinator, but as a head coach, I'm just not sure. I think he gets fired. And then Marvin Lewis. I think that the Bengals are going to make the playoffs, but I think if they have another early exit, maybe Mike Brown thinks about making a coaching change. I like Marvin Lewis, but I just don't think he's a good enough coach right now to get him over the hump. And I think they'll probably make a change there if he doesn't win a playoff game. And then there's Sean Payton in New Orleans. I like Sean Payton. I think he's a great coach, but the team I know they won against Tampa Bay last week, but the team just doesn't seem to be competing hard for him. Like they seem like they've given up, certain games. I know they played hard when they played the Carolina Panthers. I mean, the one thing with getting rid of Peyton is you risk upsetting somebody like Drew Brees, who's really close to him. But at the end of the day, I just think that, they need to go in a different direction. Sean Payton is another one of those coaches that I think won't be out of work for long because he's won a Super Bowl. He took the Saints when they were a disaster of a franchise to a Super Bowl within a couple of years, so I think he won't be out of work for long. As far as new head coaches in this league, these are new guys that haven't been head coaches before. I mean, you look at Adam Gase, the offensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears. He interviewed with the 49ers last year, didn't get that job. He's done a tremendous job in Chicago with Jay Cutler. He really knows how to, cater offenses to quarterbacks. He was with Peyton Manning in Denver and really did a great job there. And, everybody kind of wrote off Jay Cutler as, the John Fox is not going to bring him back. They're going to cut him. But he's done a really great job with Jay Cutler, and they've had a lot of injuries at the wide receiver position, and they're still aggressive. They run the ball well. I could see him getting a head coaching job. Vic Fangio, the defensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears, he also interviewed with the 49ers. And I think that, the defensive turnaround in Chicago has just been miraculous. I mean, last year they were, near the bottom of the league, and this year they're in the middle of the pack. And they don't really have a lot of superstar talent on that defense. I know they got Pernell McPhee. He's the anchor of that defense. Kyle Fuller is starting to get going, but they have a lot of young guys, and I think they're going to get better and better. And I could see, a general manager taking a chance on Fangio. He's well-respected throughout the league. He's another one. And then there's Matt Patricia, who's the defensive coordinator of the New England Patriots. Matt Patricia's done a great job in New England with the defense. They lost a lot of guys like Brandon Browner and Darrelle Revis, and he's really developed Malcolm Butler into a really great corner right now. They've had injuries throughout the years, but they seem to do a really great job stopping people when it counts. He's well-respected throughout the league. I think that he might get a look. Dirk Koetter, who's the offensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, everywhere where Dirk Koetter has been, he's done a really great job. He did a good job in Jacksonville when Jack Del Rio was the head coach. He did a great job in Atlanta with Matt Ryan, and he's doing a great job with Jameis Winston. He seems to know how to get the best out of quarterbacks, and he runs that up-tempo offense. I think that the teams will look at him. There's Sean McDermott with the Carolina Panthers. He's a well-respected defensive coordinator throughout the league. Carolina, has some talent on there, but they're not loaded with talent like other defenses. And I think with what he's got, I think he's done a really great job. I think he'll be looked at. Mike Shula, who's the offensive coordinator with the Carolina Panthers. Again, you have Cam Newton, you have Jonathan Stewart. You have a decent offensive line, but the receiver position, has been kind of, wishy-washy throughout the year. I mean, it's remarkable what Mike Shula has been able to do calling plays. I think he gets a look. And then David Shaw, who's the head coach at Stanford. A lot of people think he's a young and up-and-coming coach. He's worked with guys like Bill Walsh. I think he'll get a look. Art Briles, the head coach at Baylor. He runs that, spread offense there. I mean, I know that, there was talks about the Redskins looking at him, after Mike Shanahan got fired, but that didn't happen. But he's well respected. I think he'll get a look. Bob Stoops, the head coach at Oklahoma, I think he'll get a look. He's done a great job with that program for a while. And then the one that could be a potential sleeper is Urban Meyer. I don't think he would leave Ohio State, but I think the NFL might come calling for him. He's won national titles. We'll see what happens with that. And then, former head coaches that could be hired by a new team. You look at Mike Smith, what he did with the Atlanta Falcons. He turned them around when they were kind of a laughing stock franchise. I think that with a fresh start, I think he'll be able to get things going. I know he didn't leave Atlanta on the best of terms. Like I said, Chuck Pagano, if he got fired, he would find a new job because, he turned around the Colts. Sean Payton, an interesting one, Mike Shanahan. Mike Shanahan has come out and said that he would go to an NFL team if it was the right situation for him. I like Mike Shanahan. I like what he did in Washington. I think he set a good foundation that Jay Gruden is building on right now. And I think that, some NFL executives would look at him as well. Then there's Todd Haley. He was the head coach with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's the offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh right now. He's done a great job. He knows offense really well. I know he got Kansas City into the playoffs, but the next year the team kind of quit on him. Maybe with a fresh start he'll get things going. Josh McDaniels, he's come out and said that he's learned some new things. I mean, my only concern with Josh McDaniels is he took a good team from Mike Shanahan and basically tore it apart. So, I mean, that's my only concern is, him, just wanting to install his system and gutting the team that when it's good, we'll see what happens there. And then if Marvin Lewis is out there, I think he'll find a job, another one of those coaches that turned around a laughingstock franchise in the Cincinnati Bengals. So we'll see what happens. All right, we're going to take a short break right now, but when we come back, we're going to talk about the Baltimore Ravens signing of Ryan Mallett. And if you were the general manager of the Washington Redskins, would you re-sign Kirk Cousins? Right when we get back. Right now, we're going to talk about the Ravens signing Ryan Mallett. He signed a one-year deal worth $1.5 million with $1 million in incentives, which could be up to $2.5 million if he meets the incentives. People remember him. He was with the Houston Texans. Didn't win the starting quarterback job, got beat out by Brian Hoyer, got the job back against Kansas City, and then got hurt against the Indianapolis Colts, lost the job to Hoyer again. And then when the Texans played the Dolphins, he was late to the team flight, had to take a regular plane to get to Miami, claimed that there was traffic when there in fact was none. He was cut the next day. Good move or bad move? Good move. It's a good move if he grows up. That's really the big thing that I have issues with Ryan Mallett. He just has that immaturity. When he was at Arkansas, he showed that he has the talent. I mean, the guy has got so much talent. Like, he's got a whip of an arm. He can stand tall in the pocket. But my concern is the off-the-field issues. He had off-the-field issues at Arkansas, and he just has immaturity issues. I don't know why the Ravens brought him in. They already had Matt Schaub, Jimmy Clausen, and Brian Renner on the roster, and just found out now that Brian Renner has been released. And, looking at preseason, I thought Brian Renner looked pretty good, and I thought maybe he should have gotten a shot because, you know what you're getting with Matt Schaub. Matt Schaub has been in this league for a while, but he also has 7 straight games with a pick six. So you get interceptions returns from him. Jimmy Clausen, you get ineptitude. Against Seattle last week, he just was a model of ineptitude, really did nothing to improve the Ravens' offense, throw a boneheaded interception to Richard Sherman. I just don't know if Ryan Mallett, if he comes out and he does well, then that'll give the Ravens a backup to Joe Flacco. And, maybe if they can groom Mallett, because John Harbaugh, runs a tight ship. It's a great organization there. I think if they groom Mallett and he shows some of that talent, maybe they can trade him and get some draft picks. Who knows? But I think it's also a sign that the Ravens don't believe in Matt Schaub or Jimmy Clausen. But I think Brian Renner should have gotten a shot, but, maybe the coaching staff didn't think he was ready, but we'll see what happens. Next thing up right now is the Washington Redskins. Do you re-sign Kirk Cousins? There's a lot of pros, to re-signing him. He gives you stability at the quarterback position. He's good at reading defense. He's accurate. He hasn't had as many turnovers this year as he did last year. The team really seems to rally around him and respond to him. They play hard whenever he's out there. I think it's a good solution for the time being until they find that quarterback in the draft. Um, the cons of the cons of re-signing him is he still commits too many turnovers at inopportune times. He takes unnecessary sacks like he did against Chicago last week. If they get in the playoffs, he'll probably want an unreasonable amount of money. The consistency with him is just not there yet. I mean, I know he's improved from last year, but there's games where he just doesn't get it done. And his road record is not that good. And I'm just not sure if he's good enough to get the Redskins over the hump. We'll see what happens. But I think if you can get him to accept a 2-year contract worth $12 million, with incentives that could be up to this amount of money, I say go for it. But if he wants somewhere in the neighborhood of like $9 million a year, I say let him walk. We can draft a quarterback next year, or if Brock Osweiler is still out on the market, I say we sign him. I think that the Redskins have to re-sign him, but they need to be smart because, Cousins, this is his first full season under his belt. I mean, they just need to be smart in negotiating with him, and that's my take on that. Okay, now we're in the section of the show called Dick's Picks. So we're going to start off with the Thursday night game, the Buccaneers at the Rams. I like the Buccaneers this game. I just don't think that the Rams have consistent enough quarterback play to beat Jameis Winston. I know they have some defensive talent, but I like Jameis and the Bucs. I think they win this one. Then there's the Jets at the Cowboys. I think the Jets win this one. I don't trust Matt Castle. I know people are calling for, the other quarterback on the roster. I can't remember what his name is, but I just don't think that he's the answer right now. But I like the Jets this game. I think they'll win this one going away. The Panthers at the Giants. I like the Panthers this game, but this is a potential trap game. I think that Josh Norman's a great corner, but I don't know if he's faced a receiver of the caliber like an Odell Beckham. He did a good job against Dez Bryant. I mean, a banged up Dez Bryant, but we'll see what happens. I think the Panthers win this one. Titans at the Patriots. I'm picking New England. I think they're going to blow the doors off the Titans. I mean, the only way the Titans can keep the game competitive is to get turnovers. I mean, they play solid defense. They can rush the passer, but I just think it's a lot for a Marcus Mariota to go to Foxborough and upset Tom Brady. I like New England that game. And then we have the Bills at the Redskins. I like the Redskins this game. I just think that, Buffalo is just not consistent. And with all that talent on that roster, they're not executing. They're not making plays. They give up explosive plays. I think Deshaun Jackson could potentially have a big game. I think Cousins will play okay. I like Washington in that game. Then we have the Chiefs at the Ravens. I like Kansas City this game. If Schaub is starting or Clausen is starting or Mallett is starting, I just don't think they can beat Kansas City. I like Kansas City that game. And then there's the Texans at the Colts. If Hasselbeck is starting, I just think he's gotten the Colts as far as he can get. He got hurt last game, so if Charlie Whitehurst is going to start, I think the Texans will win. Then the Falcons at the Jaguars. I like Jacksonville this game. I think they have a really great nucleus on offense. I think they can score points. I don't know what's going on with Matt Ryan right now. I think Dan Quinn might need to make a quarterback change. I know that sounds crazy, but I think that at the end of the day, he needs to galvanize the locker room and tell the guys, look, if you're not going to perform, you're going to be on the bench. And I just think that team started off 5-0 and they've lost 6 of their last 7 games. And I just think that right now, he needs to get the team going, but I just don't think it's enough. I like Jacksonville that game. And then there's the Bears at the Vikings. I like Minnesota this game. I think Chicago will make it interesting. They always play each other tough, but I think at the end of the day, Vikings are a better team. They'll take that one. The Packers at the Raiders. I know everyone's going to pick Green Bay, but I'm picking Oakland. I think it's a tough task on the road. I think Derek Carr is playing exceptional football right now. The problem I have with the Green Bay Packers is they're just not consistent. They'll show up one week and, beat a good team, then they'll go lay an egg against the Lions. They'll, for all intents and purposes, they should have lost that game, that second game against the Lions. Then they'll lose to Chicago. I mean, I just think I just like the Raiders this game. I think that they'll get some explosive plays from their offense. I know defensively they have issues, but they played great against Denver last week, and I like Oakland. Browns at the Seahawks. Pretty self-explanatory. I like Seattle this game. I just think they're too much. I think they're going to blow the brakes off the Browns. Bengals at the 49ers. I like Cincinnati. The only thing is that it's A.J. McCarron. He did pretty well, getting off the bench against Pittsburgh. We'll see what happens. The 49ers are going to have to get turnovers. But the biggest issue with the Niners is their offensive line. They surrendered 10 sacks against the Browns. And Cincinnati really can rush the passer. I like Cincinnati that game. The Dolphins at the Chargers. I like the Miami Dolphins. I just think they're a better team right now. San Diego's banged up. I think Miami wins that one. Then the Broncos at the Steelers. I like Pittsburgh this game. They're playing at home. I think their offense is on a roll right now. I just don't know if the Broncos offensive line can contain Bud Dupree and Ryan Shazier and Jarvis Jones and Cameron Hayward and those guys coming off the edge. They're going to have to play great to beat Pittsburgh, but I just don't think it'll be enough. I think I like Pittsburgh that game. And then the Cardinals at the Eagles. I like Arizona this game. I don't trust Sam Bradford. I don't think he can win in a shootout with a Carson Palmer. And I just think Arizona has too many weapons for Philadelphia to stop. I don't think Philadelphia has enough weapons to beat Arizona. I like Arizona that game. And then the Lions at the Saints. I think this will be a good one, but at the end of the day, I like Drew Brees at home. I think the Saints win that game. All right. Thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in. If you would like to be a guest on the DMV NFL show, please email at executivedirector.fgs@gmail.com to set up an appointment. That is executivedirector.fgs@gmail.com if you'd like to be on the show. Thanks very much, and tune in to the next episode of the DMV NFL show.